Let the rain fall down
And with
and make my
my
dreams.
dreams. I got so emo to that song. Oof, I was like, I
Oh my
feel
God.
this. I understand this.
Distinctly remember it was like I was in fifth grade. We
Yeah,
were
I was
getting
gonna
ready
say
for
we were
this.
in 5th grade.
I was
Yes,
getting ready
completely.
for the science fair and I was picking up some things for my science project and it was raining and I was in my mom's minivan and I was allowed to sit in the front seat and the rain was dripping down on the window and this song was playing and I was in a music video, baby.
I wish we could have met then. We would have had just as good of a time then as we do now, honestly.
I worry for the world.
I know.
The world would not have been prepared for that.
Yes, I've had the odd complaints, but on the whole, I've been a saint. To those poor unfortunate souls.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Poor Unfortunate Podcast. I'm Caroline Ameti.
And I'm Conor Perkins. Welcome, all of our returning listeners. Thank you so much for coming back and listening to another episode with us. And welcome to any new listeners. Thank you so much for hitting play. Please also remember to hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast. That way, all of our episodes download to your device. You don't miss out on anything. And then everybody, you know what I'm going to say. We're all going to, at the end of this episode, hit 5 stars and leave a written review wherever you're listening to the podcast. And now if you're listening on Spotify, you can actually leave a comment. So just leave a comment and just be like, hey, I really liked this, or hey, I disagreed with this, or hey, this was really, really fun. Because that all helps us get seen in search results. It helps boost our visibility and helps us reach new audience members. Because that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to grow and
We are.
make this worthwhile and find new people, before we die.
Oh, you can tell where we're at today.
So we are now back around to our Showdown episode. Caroline, why don't you tell the folks at home what we doing?
So today we are talking about Pixar shorts. We've been wanting to talk about this for a long time, and we had a hard time deciding which Pixar shorts to put in the Showdown. So we posted to the fam. So if you've been thinking about joining the Poor Unfortunate fam on Facebook, you should have already, because they got to choose the 2 shorts featured in the Showdown, and they chose Tin Toy and Knick Knack, 2 of the pre-Toy Story Pixar shorts.
Yeah,
So we're taking
choices.
it way back. Yeah, great choice.
Yeah, they're both available on Disney Plus. So if you haven't watched either of these, it is a grand total of 9 minutes of your life to watch both of these. So I highly recommend you pausing this podcast, go refresh yourself if you've seen them, or watch them for the first time. They are great classic Pixar shorts from the early days of Pixar, and we will wait for you to come back. And welcome back. So we're going to look at these 2 shorts kind of overall, but through their strengths and weaknesses in their stories and characters, and then also their strengths and weaknesses in design/music. And as always, first, we've got some background information for you. So I'll start with Tin Toy, because Tin Toy was the first one of these 2 to be released.
Mm-hmm.
So Tin Toy, it is a 5-minute short film and the 3rd short that Pixar ever made. The first 3/5 of the film premiered on August 2nd, 1988 at SIGGRAPH, which is a conference for computer graphics. Despite desperate attempts to finish the film ahead of the conference, the animators were unable to complete it. However, what was shown at the conference completely blew away audiences and received a standing ovation from scientists and engineers alike. This film was released on home video as part of an anthology of shorts called Tiny Toy Stories, and in the VHS and DVD release of Pixar Shorts Volume 1. It is most widely remembered, however, as being added to the VHS and DVD release of Toy Story in October of 2000. This film was directed by John Lasseter. The story is also by John Lasseter. It is produced by William Reeves and Pixar Animation Studios, and it stars Tinny the Tin Toy and Billy the Baby. The budget for this film was $300,000 for this 5-minute short film.
Wow.
I'm going to give you a little bit of information that sort of goes along with this budget and the making of this film, because I do think that that's really important for both of these shorts to understand where Pixar was and how we got Pixar from these two shorts, which may look very dated to you as you watch them, to what we now know and expect from Pixar. So in 1986, Steve Jobs of Apple purchased Pixar, which was a computer company with a fledgling animation group headed by former Disney animator John Lasseter. The role of the animation group was to produce shorts that would advertise the Pixar computers. After the first two shorts, Luxo Jr. and Red's Dream, and with Pixar continuing to lose money, it looked like the animation division was not long for this world. The company was strapped for cash and was dividing in half between the engineers who were prioritizing the technology aspect of the company, the part that made money, and those who wanted to spend it and explore the world of entertainment. In 1988, Steve Jobs was basically single-handedly keeping the company afloat on a line of credit and was doing major budget cuts when John Lasseter approached him to ask for more money to make this film, Tin Toy. Founders of Pixar, Edwin Catmull and Alvy Ray Smith, who were big believers in the animation group and sort of secretly wanted to make films the whole time, much to the chagrin of everyone around them, they brought Steve Jobs to a pitch meeting with John Lasseter, who essentially with this film was pitching the survival of the animation division of Pixar. He had storyboards on the walls and he acted out the parts with voices much like Walt Disney when pitching Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. By the end of the meeting, Steve Jobs approved the money for the film because he believed in Lasseter's passion and the art that he was making. And he said to him, quote, "All I ask of you, John, is to make it great," end quote. So now let's talk about the reception. This film won an Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film in 1988, becoming the first computer animated film to earn an Academy Award. This film paved the way for computer animation to be seen as a legitimate artistic medium outside of animation festival circuits and science and engineering conferences. Basically, this film, them winning an Oscar, showed the world that this is the future of animation. And they were very, very right. The success of this film garnered interest from Walt Disney Company, who would partner with Pixar to create Toy Story, which was directly inspired by the plot of this film. In 2003, Tin Toy was selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant films. And this is quite literally the film that saved Pixar. So that's Tin Toy. I'll give you a plot synopsis real quick. I just stole one from Wikipedia. In a living room, a toy one-man band player named Tinny looks around and sees a baby named Billy arrive. At first, Tinny is delighted at the prospect of being played with by Billy until he sees how destructive the infant can be. When Tinny tries to walk out of Billy's reach, the musical instruments on the former's back begin to play, attracting Billy's attention. Tinny begins to run, but is pursued by Billy. During the pursuit, Tinny soon finds himself under the cover of a couch, finding a collection of toys in hiding, similarly terrified of Billy, because they've gone through the same experience. Unaware of this, Billy accidentally trips but falls over on the hardwood surface floor face first while searching for Tinny and begins to cry. Feeling sorry for the baby, Tinny sees this, leaves the couch sanctuary, and begins to play near Billy to calm him down. Upon seeing this, Billy stops crying and picks up Tinny to play with, the latter fearing the worst. However, Billy soon lets go of Tinny the toy, more interested in his packaging. Tinny plays music and tries following Billy in hopes of being noticed, but is mad and ignored and ends up trying to stop him no matter where he goes, eventually out into the hallway as Billy leaves covered in a shopping bag as the newly optimistic toys from underneath the couch slowly emerge. So yeah, Caroline, I'm going to turn it over to you. Talk about Knick Knack.
Okay, so Knick Knack is a roughly 4-minute long short that premiered in 3D on September 1st, 1989, just like Tin Toy at the SIGGRAPH convention. So that's Special Interest Group on Computer Graphics and Interactive Techniques, obsessed. It was Pixar's 4th short and its final pre-Toy Story short, and Pixar's first animation to be produced in stereoscopic 3D. It was one of the only 2 pre-Toy Story Pixar shorts to be re-released alongside a feature film from Pixar, the first being Luxo Jr. when it was released alongside Toy Story 2 in 1999. So we got that great history of Pixar from Conor. Here's what was going on at Pixar at the time. So following the 1988 Oscar win for Tin Toy, interest in the animation department was reignited for the then Pixar owner Steve Jobs, leading him to approve the production of another short, which became this one, Knick Knack. Tin Toy's success also reignited Disney's interest in John Lasseter, who had been fired from the company several years prior, but he did not want to rejoin the Disney company. A remastered and slightly altered, which we will get to, version of the short was paired with Finding Nemo, which was released on May 30th, 2003, and is probably the reason most of us are familiar with this short. Before Nemo, it was released on the VHS and Laserdisc Tiny Toy Stories and also on the Toy Story Deluxe Laserdisc edition. It was also released along with the 2006 3D theatrical re-release of The Nightmare Before Christmas with a return to its original 3D form. The short is written and directed by John Lasseter, produced by John Lasseter and Pixar Animation Studios, of course. So John was inspired by his wife Nancy's habit of buying a snow globe from every place they vacationed, as well as the exuberance of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which he watched during the production of Tin Toy, actually. Lasseter said that he wanted to create something, quote, pure cartoony, like a Chuck Jones cartoon, end quote. So basically something very Looney Tunes inspired. After the challenge of animating Billy in Tin Toy, Lasseter and team wanted to avoid animating a human character. So this short has no voice talent, as the story is told only through music and visuals. Its 2 main characters are Nick the Snowman and Sunny Miami, with supporting performances from other travel souvenirs like Sunny Florida, Sunny Jamaica, and Sunny Atlantis.
And the goldfish. Don't forget the goldfish.
Of course, we do have a living creature in this short. The music is by Bobby McFerrin, who is a jazz singer, songwriter, and conductor who had no idea. He also wrote and recorded Don't Worry, Be Happy the year before he did the music for this. I had no idea. No idea.
Oh, yeah. No, that's
Amazing.
Bobby McFerrin, baby.
Amazing. So McFerrin improvised a vocal a cappella jazz track for the film when he watched a rough cut of it, and that is the score we hear in the short today. The rough cut credits still read blah, 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 blah. So McFerrin sang those words, and even that made it into the final soundtrack, which is just delightful. And we will talk more about that later.
It's iconic.
So the reception for this short, it has a 7.4 on IMDb and an 81% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. It won Best Short Film at the Seattle International Film Festival in 1990, and it was also presented at the London Film Festival in 1991, earning raves. The Independent called it a 4-minute masterpiece. So, plot synopsis, again, pulled right from Wikipedia. On a bookshelf filled with vacation-themed souvenirs, a lonely and grumpy Playboy Knick Knack snowman named Nick, who resides in a gnome, sweet gnome Alaska snow globe, wants to reach a female Sunny Miami Knick Knack that shows an attractive blonde and tanned pool lounger wearing a blue bikini and sunglasses. Nick tries several unsuccessful methods to break out of the globe, which include ramming the glass with the snow globe's igloo backdrop, using his carrot nose and a hammer on the glass, using a jackhammer, which causes his facial features to fly off, trying to cut the glass using a blowtorch and an igniter, and detonating TNT explosives. The latter causes the globe to fall over the edge. Nick notices an emergency exit in the base and frees himself just before he and the globe fall into a fishbowl, where Nick sees an identical mermaid souvenir from sunny Atlantis and starts gawking at her. But this only backfires when he attempts to run towards her, and the globe settles to the bottom of the fishbowl and traps him again, much to his annoyance.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Knick Knack, baby.
Knick
Patty
Knack.
whack. Give the dog a bone.
Give that dog a bone.
So we're going to start by talking about the strengths and weaknesses in the story and characters of Tin Toy, and then we'll go over to Knick Knack. So some things here that I think are really, really strong for Tin Toy. The story is fantastic, in my opinion. I think we all have such a hard time thinking about a time when Toy Story and the personification of our childhood toys during playtime had not entered the culture at large.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that is so universal and yet so personal at the same time. And Toy Story captured it perfectly. And the reason it did is because of the foundation of that story, which is here in Tin Toy. And that's the question, what is it like for a toy to be played with by a child? We get the full emotional range in Tinny of the wonder and awe of coming home, the excitement of being played with, the fear of an unpredictable child, the jealousy of being ignored, everything that is foundational to the emotional world of Toy Story. I mean, hell, what is this short if not the very first iteration of Sunnyside Daycare's Caterpillar Room from Toy Story 3? There is so much imagination in such a very simple concept. Billy the Baby as a character is kind of genius, in my opinion. They have perfectly captured the impulsive, random, moment-to-moment actions of a baby. It's very clear that they let the voice recordings influence a lot of the animation work that happens, and it was the right thing to do. As a result, we get a very complex and well-rounded view of this essentially nonsense character. They've taken all of the idiosyncrasies, the sudden pause in preparation for an oncoming sneeze, the elongated moment of silence to absorb the shock of a fall, the easily diverted attention floating from toy to packaging. They've taken all of that and then created an arc of story by putting the puzzle together in a new way. I think Billy is actually one of the most realistic characters that Pixar has ever created in terms of how he behaves and his just character in general. And I think it's because of how faithful they stayed to what was happening in that voice performance. Billy laid a lot of groundwork for how Pixar would then approach children in future films, like Boo in Monsters, Inc. and Jack Jack.
Yes, I thought of Jack Jack too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, down to like the technique of like the way that they did Boo is they followed a little girl, a little baby girl around with a microphone and recorded everything and then animated that. And that's what they essentially did with Billy as well. And then I would also say that this story introduces a sort of fundamental pillar of the Pixar film, which is to make a problem or an emotion the villain of the story rather than a character. In this film, yes, Billy functions as an antagonist to Tinny, our protagonist, in that he creates conflict and an opportunity for Tinny's growth. But he is very clearly not a villain. Instead, it is the toy's perceptions and fears of him that is the villainous aspect of this story. And by the end of the short, Billy has become disinterested in Tinny, and it is Tinny's jealousy and desire for attention that takes on the role of the big bad in this scenario. So I think it's really, really important that we not overlook that in this simple 5-minute short, sort of the thesis for Pixar's way of storytelling is kind of all laid out right here. Especially if you were to just look at Toy Story, I'm like, the journey of Woody is right there in the Tin Toy.
Yeah, and we take it for granted because we didn't get to see it really before Toy Story. So it's just like, but yeah, it's so true. Wow.
Yeah.
I agree with all of those. I particularly love the scene setting at the beginning of the short. Like we're given all of the information that we need to know about Tinny and like the familiar like living room setting and the toys that we see. They're also evocative. So we don't need to warm up into this story at all. We're in it immediately. And exactly what you said. This short has perfect hits of humor, stakes, and pathos. Exactly right. This feels like the short that made Toy Story rather than Knick Knack, despite it being created closer to the creation of Toy Story. That moment, the reveal of all of the other terrified toys hiding under the couch, I think is just pure brilliance. I feel like that image is burned into my memory from my childhood, not
Yeah.
only because of their like wide, quaking eyes and the surprise of the moment of seeing them. It's so funny, but because there's something like really sad about it too. Like it's hard to describe.
Yeah.
Again, that first time that we're like, oh, what do our toys feel? Are they afraid of us? Like it hits me right in the heart for some reason. And it's so amazing to know that this German idea would blossom into Toy Story.
Right. And like that's what I was saying in terms of like the most important thing that we can do when looking at this film is to remember that Toy Story
Mhm.
did not exist. I
Yeah.
don't think we can ever fully grapple with what a time before Toy Story actually looks like anymore. In
Yeah.
the same way
Yeah.
that like thinking about a time before Mickey Mouse doesn't
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
exist.
Yeah.
It changed the game so much outside of just media in general, but just the way that we interact with our daily lives.
It's true. It's very true. Yeah. Wow. Also, exactly what you said about Billy. Babies are just so inherently funny and mesmerizing. So it's just the humor of the short feels very natural and very story and character driven, never forced. The baby behavior is just absolutely nailed. Exactly what you said.
The sneeze is my favorite.
It's so
Just
funny.
the achoo.
I also just love Tinny as the protagonist. Like, we are immediately endeared to him, not only because of his adorable design, so kudos in that category as well, but because of the way he looks at Billy with pure adoration when he first sees him. Watching a toy fall in love with a child immediately makes us willing to go along for the ride of the short and just like want everything to work out. It's so sweet. And there's just it's something that's like a little bit more intangible that is just so memorable and endearing about this short. Like my husband, not the biggest font of Disney knowledge, remembered it immediately. He probably has not seen
Yeah.
it since the 90s. Maybe it's the baby sounds throughout and the sweetness of Tinny, but it just feels very warm. And I think, I'm not trying to get ahead of myself here, but I think this is what makes it feel more special than Knick Knack, while acknowledging, and we will talk about this, that Knick Knack is trying to accomplish something very different and something more comedy focused. So we'll
Yeah.
talk about that. And then I just love the fun elements that, again, it's just like the birth of Pixar and the things that Pixar does,
Yeah.
doing it for the first time. So like fun elements in the credits of seeing that the Pixar team actually named the toys hiding under the couch,
Yeah.
like Gumbo,
It's so good.
helicopter sheep, Clocky, and more. Like it's so funny. And the real life baby references that quote John looked at a lot. It's just this short really makes the credits feel like an extension, an integrated part of the short. And that's just the stuff that Pixar is so good at. And this was the start of that. It's so amazing.
So let's talk about some of the weaknesses here in the character and the story of Tin Toy. So I really have like one sort big thing that I want to call out, and that is the story lacks a clear button at the end to sort of let you know that we've reached the end of the story. Shorts work best when there is something that ties everything up or some sort of neat reversal of expectations. They sort of have it with Billy getting distracted by the packaging, but that bit plays on for a while and then just sort of plays
Mhm.
itself out over and over in the credits. In my opinion, this short has sort of the equivalent of an SNL sketch that just ends with people randomly dancing to a song as opposed to like
Yeah.
a solid joke or conclusion.
That's funny.
And you could say that it's a choice to present it as like how reality keeps moving on and trying to present this scene as like a slice of life. That's fine. That being said, it does sort of conflict with some of the comedy aspects that they are integrating into this story. And it makes me believe that they are looking more for that sort of sketch comedy payoff in this short. Slice of life is great, but those are always going to be less cathartic than something that has a bit more structure to it. And so I think just having a little bit more structure at the end could really, I mean, it's already a masterful short, but like,
Yeah.
that is something that Knick Knack does have
Mhm.
that I appreciate it. And it's also something that like feels kind of slightly intangible, but you're like, there's something more satisfying about the end of Knick Knack than there is at the end of Tin
Yeah,
Toy.
I didn't realize I felt that at the end of Tin Toy, but I did. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the SNL, we're going
The
to play a
beat.
song and just dance.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God.
Yeah. My weaknesses are pretty small, a little nitpicky, but just like kind of coming it to this short with fresh eyes as an adult. Seeing Billy wailing and lying face down on the ground, I wonder where in the actual hell his parents are.
Where are the parents?
Like, okay.
Where's mom and dad?
I know that we need him to be alone so that Tinny can be the hero, but maybe it would have been more realistic if we saw even just the feat of a parent putting him down on the floor to play for a minute and like going and picking up the phone or something. It probably has to do with the animation as well, but I always feel like Billy's life is in danger by the way his face is on the literal floor. And then when he puts the bag over his head, oh my God, the babysitter in me actually cannot handle it.
I remember in the 90s, I had Tiny Toy Stories. I had this VHS where all of these shorts were on before Pixar had merged with Disney. And I was sitting there, my 5-year-old self watching this, and he puts the bag on his head. And I'm just like, no, we don't put bags on our heads. That's going to suffocate him.
Oh my God. And so again, like I know it's all in good fun and it's supposed to be funny, but with so much realism in the short, like the TV sounds, the magazine on the couch even, it just sticks out because it's just
the photograph of John Lasseter.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just, we should have had his mom or dad bring him in. That would have helped.
Yeah. That 100% was the choice. That was a choice that was based on the animation trying to make this as easy as possible.
They're like, no more humans.
Also, if you're going to try and make this as easy as possible, don't pick a baby. Ain't nothing easy about a baby.
No. And then just one other small thing. I just wish we got a little bit more of Billy and Tinny connecting and interacting. Although Tinny does save the day and stop Billy from crying, Billy moves on pretty quickly to playing with the boxes and the bags and just generally being chaotic. And I know that is part of the comedy of it as well. And it is funny, but I just would have loved truly one more second of a deeper moment of connection between them before Billy moves on to kind of give Tinny that satisfaction that you can see he's looking for the first time that he sees the baby.
Yeah, I think it could have benefited from that because, I mean, that could even just be like a series of like close-up shots going back from like a close-up on Tinny's face to a close-up on Billy.
Yeah,
to a close-up on
exactly.
Tinny to a close-up on Billy to then a close-up on Tinny smiling like, oh my God, it's happening.
Yeah.
And then close-up on Billy, his eyes move over to the packaging and then he sets him down and then we keep going. It could have just been that, just like a couple frames.
Exactly. So true. Okay, let's hop on over to Knick Knack. Let's talk about the strengths happening in the story and the characters here. So, since the short wasn't released with a family film or any film at all, I can see this being a big hit at a computer graphics conference as a standalone short that you could say is a bit more aimed at grown-ups. It has a pretty
all those men.
I mean, not for nothing. Like it has a pretty adult dilemma and sense of humor while still feeling cartoonish in tone. So, folks attending the conference probably grew up watching Tom and Jerry and Looney Tunes, so it would be pretty exciting to see a familiar type of story evolved through tone and the use of this amazing new technology. And I will say, speaking of the tone of the story is very clear from the start. Like, we know now and love Pixar for tugging at our heartstrings, but you can feel by the way that we are introduced to Nick that we aren't supposed to feel particularly sad about him being excluded from the other Knick Knacks the way that we would if we saw an excluded toy in any other Pixar production. We move right into him taking action, focusing on classic cartoon mayhem rather than sitting with what he's feeling. So it's just very clear what kind of adventure we're in for here. The problem is simple and clear, as is the end of the short. It ends with a button that is familiar in style to us, so it feels super satisfying. So in a way that, there's something I couldn't quite put my finger on in Tin Toy that felt like the beats and timing were a little bit off, and this cleans that up a bit for sure.
Yeah, I think the story is very satisfying. It's fun. It's funny. Uses great physical comedy that we know from those classic cartoons. It uses principles like the rules of three, escalation, reversals, and they all make for well-crafted story and short form entertainment. So it makes this short very easy to watch and also very rewatchable, where even though we
Mm.
know what happens, we can still go for the emotional ride because the ride is baked into the format.
Mhm,
It doesn't
mhm.
rely on us feeling a particular way towards a character because it's plot driven mostly.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a very solid button at the end, classic storytelling technique. Like it's just really cathartic where you're like, ah,
Yeah.
it's
Ba,
that.
ba-da-ba-ba-ba, yeah.
And then I also just like wanted to say, I think there's a lot of Wally in Nick. In his sort of
Oh.
like desperate, heroic, often tragic pursuit of love, like even juxtaposed with the relaxed, casual style of music, it reads similar to Wally when he's taking Eve
Oh,
on
yeah.
dates that usually end up going slightly awry as he's like hoping that she might wake up. So as I was watching that, I was like, I see. I would not be surprised if when they were doing Wally and they were doing that like the date scenes where he's like prying her hand to try and hold her hand and then it like smashes his hand. I wouldn't be surprised if they looked at Knick Knack for inspiration for that.
Oh, I didn't notice that, but now I totally see it. Yeah. As far as weaknesses go, it's interesting. You kind of like debunked a little bit of one of mine. So it's like, okay, I don't particularly root for Nick. Now, like exactly what you said. I know the aim of the short was just like comedy, cartoon comedy. We don't actually need to feel for him. Like you said, it's about the action. But I don't know. I didn't really find him charismatic or funny enough to really have me attached to the outcome of this action. I'm not really sure what I could tell you about his personality, and Pixar has proven time and time again that character is totally possible to establish in a very short amount of time. Just like Bugs Bunny and all of the Looney Tunes were wont to do, he really is just out here ogling titties, but without the appeal of the other Looney Tunes characters who did the same. So, on that note, I have to say it. The sexualization of the two female characters in the short, it's so annoying to me. Now, before anyone accuses me of not having a sense of humor, yes, I get it. These busty gals feel very much in line with Chuck Jones cartoon styles, and the 80s were a different time. Yes, yes. However, the versions of Sunny Miami and Sunny Atlantis we see in the remastered version, the one that's on Disney Plus, which still feel very sexualized, are actually desexualized from their original
Yes.
versions.
Because I had started writing down, I was like, the big tittied ladies and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
And
then
those
I
aren't even
rewatched
the
it back
big
and I was
titty
like,
ladies.
and I was like, wait, they don't have boobs. I'm like, why do I remember them having like really, really
Yeah.
big round boobs? And it's because they did.
Mhm, they did. Both characters' breast sizes have been reduced from the original. And Sunny Atlantis now wears a clamshell bra as opposed to the starfish pasties just covering her nipples that she wore in the original short. And I, not to get too deep in the weeds about this, I truly cannot emphasize enough how large these breasts in the original were.
They were
Miami's bathing suit
very
barely
large.
covered them. Like her bathing suit was like a band
Yes.
around the nipples. Again, okay, I can't believe. So aside from the fact that it feels so silly to be talking about this way, I ask you this. If it was all in good fun and I need to lighten up, then why were
Why'd they
those
change
changes
it?
made for the
Why'd
2003
they
Finding
change
Nemo
it?
release?
Name
Now,
them.
John Lasseter commented on the changes, saying, quote, "It wasn't big bad Disney coming in and insisting we do this. It was our own choice. It was just crossing the line for me personally as a father. So I made the decision to reduce these characters' breast size," end quote. And knowing what we know about Lasseter's behavior towards women,
Yeah.
the way these two female characters are animated, sorry, now totally takes me out of the story and really makes me pissed. So there's that.
Yeah.
While I understand the design motivations behind creating another short starring toy-like characters, it does feel a little bit unoriginal coming after Tin Toy. While there is definitely nice variety in the tone of the two starring characters, Tinny and Nick, and in the shorts in general, it does feel like returning to the well a little bit. And while the dilemma of this story is clear, despite the fact that we only have a few minutes to solve it, it still feels a little bit simplistic to me. Now, in some ways, this is completely correct considering the stylistic inspiration, but I don't quite feel this holding my attention the way a simple Looney Tune can. The obstacle or the quote unquote big bad of the story is the snow globe structure itself. I don't know, which is fine. To me, I'm nitpicking. It feels a little bit meh.
You're nitpicking for sure.
And Nick's want is just to get with a hottie. Not particularly high stakes, which is fine. It doesn't have to be. Again, it is a cartoon comedy.
It's a short.
It's a short, I know. But I just didn't find it particularly funny or clever enough. Because again, I love Looney Tunes. Those are super simple. Tom and Jerry, it's literally just a cat chasing a mouse around. And I loved those growing up. And there is something that attention grab isn't 100% here for me with this. Like, as he's trying the different methods at first to get out of the snow globe, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, I glaze over a little bit. I'm like, yeah, he's still just trying to get out. I do too.
Yeah. Because they're not in the way of Looney Tunes. Like, when I think of like Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, of being just like a little bit too elaborate.
Yeah.
Like, it just sort of like is like, oh my God, I would think like, I would come up with this in my brain, but I didn't think that the animators were thinking of like what this would look like and that level of clever. And there's only one of those that does hit that level of clever, and that's the blowtorch moment and the like him with the striker like struggling to strike the thing and that like grating that like shink 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 shink, like that's perfect. Like that is Pixar gold for me.
Yeah, I didn't really get a chuckle out of any of his attempts, and I wanted one.
Damn.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
That's the one that got me. And that one also feels very Wall-E to me.
Yeah.
Of like when Wall-E has like the fire extinguisher and it's just like, shoom, or like blows up and like goes out of frame. That's always like a good comedy moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want people to know, like, I loved Looney Tunes growing up. I have Pepe Le Pew. I think he's funny. Like, I am not a humorless person here. It's just, I don't know. It just didn't do it for me in this case.
No, I mean, you've hit all of my weaknesses on it, but I very much had sort of like in bold was the sexualization of the female characters and like, yes, understanding the time and the place and the function and all of that. But I distinctly remembered as a kid the big boobs on these like, characters, and it was just unnecessary. And it's I'm all for growth in people, and it's nice to see that John Lasseter came around to that sort of decision with this, but I'm also like, do I fully trust that you came to this decision on your own and we're not pressured by other people within to do this?
And it's like, but it's okay
because
to like
of his actions.
Yeah, and it's okay to sexualize women, but until you have kids, I'm just like, what? When people say like, I could start a whole other rant on this, but when people say things like that, it's like, I have a daughter now or whatever it is. I'm like, what? Please, don't get me started. Don't get me started.
Yeah,
it was okay to sexualize women before I had children. Why? Why was it? Tell me. Explain it. Like I'm stupid.
And that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing about Pixar in the early days and even into their merger with Disney, really until John Lasseter left Disney and Pixar together.
Yeah.
The sort of boys club of Pixar is very, very clear.
Absolutely.
And it seems like there has been very, very conscious efforts in the current era of Pixar to push away from it. And I think that that's only helping the studio. Take, for example, Inside Out 2, which is directed by a female identifying director and is currently the second highest, is poised to pass Frozen 2 as the second highest grossing animated feature film worldwide ever. So
it's all a happy ending, which we love.
And John Lasseter is now working for Skydance. So he's their animation group with Paramount. John Lasseter is now heading that up. So I was reading an article where he was like, he's taken some time away from the industry to really think about his behavior, think about his interactions, the way that he did business, and make a change. So I'm all for giving people chances to make a change, so long as a change actually happens and reparations are made. An apology without changed behavior and reparations is not an apology.
Say it.
All right, so now let's talk about the design and the music for Tin Toy. Strengths that we've got here. The design of the toys is very strong. I think it was a great idea to give the toys these cartoon-like eyes, being that they are personified objects against the backdrop of this hyper-realistic world. It allows us to sort of make that leap of juxtaposing these worlds, but also blending them together. It's what they essentially, I mean, it's what toys are in our world. They're
Mm-hmm.
these simplistic versions of the realistic things that they represent. The animation of light, in particular, how it interacts with different surfaces to indicate texture, is a really, really big deal here. This is the foundation of that subsurface scattering technique that Pixar will continue to develop to create in the films that we know today. The highlights on Tinny's body and the shadows on the drum help sell the illusion of the tin texture and the matte
Mm.
plastic drum on his back. Further, the shadows all around offer a realistic depth to the environment that we don't really see in two-dimensional films. Instead of animation on top of a stagnant background, the 3D environment created by the light and shadows gives the illusion that the background has as much potential to suddenly become animated as any of the characters.
Mm.
And that is what's so mind-blowing about this technology and about this style of animation and what makes it all feel so real.
Yep, that's great. I totally agree. I don't really have much to add. I mean, I totally agree with all the good stuff happening there. I just like the fun that continues to be had with that they continue to have with this in Toy Story later. I love seeing recognizable real world toys like the rainbow ring stacker. It's just, again, that thing I was talking about earlier. It's that Pixar style visual fun that nobody else was doing in the 80s and now is just one of their signature things today, like looking for little Easter eggs, looking for things that are real. It's
Yeah,
just
find the
so
Pizza
fun.
Planet truck.
Yeah, I love that so much. And also, sound is used to great effect here. Billy's crying. I mean, I know it's just a baby, but it's so sad. And the
Yeah.
way that we get to hear what Tinny is feeling via his musical instruments is absolutely brilliant. And the soundscape really fills in some of what is lacking in some of the realism of the animation. The classic TV sounding intro music and the matching title aesthetic also provide more of the familiarity and warmth that I was talking about earlier. So I just feel like the sound and the design just keep adding more and more and more of that warmth that I think makes this really special.
So now let's talk about some of the weaknesses in the design and in the music here.
Yeah.
Unlike most short films, this lacks music accompanying the action of the scene. And it is very clear that this is an instance where the animators are trying to bring a sense of reality to the film, grounding it in just the Foley and the voiceover of Billy, which I think is fantastic. They do a really, really great job. They're also trying to simplify it for themselves because they were racing against a time clock to try and get this done
Mm-hmm.
for that conference. And even then, they didn't finish. It actually ended right when Billy's distorted face is in the cellophane.
Oh,
That's where
wow.
it ended. Yeah.
Wow.
However, I do think that this film could really benefit from some sort of underscoring to further emphasize the emotional journey of Tinny.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those instances where I don't think it would actually take away from the realism of it. There's enough that they could do with scoring, even just lightly in
Something
different
really
places,
light. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
just emphasize those moments and really heighten the peaks and valleys of the emotional roller coaster of the story. And then the big one. Okay, a lot of people find Billy the baby to be frightening. And yeah, he definitely occupies an uncanny valley space with his plastic-like skin and cement diaper. Part of that is the limitation of
I didn't expect you. I was waiting to see how you were going to describe it, and you did not disappoint.
Listen, I actually stole the phrase cement diaper right from somebody else who had described it that way after seeing the film. And like a
It's
film
good.
critic who was like cement diaper. It's because
great.
that's what it is. It doesn't move. The saliva that weirdly disconnects and reconnects to his body in sharp, jagged points, the smushed features of the face, the odd freckles, whatever the nipples are doing. It's just it's a mess. It's a mess. And a lot of it is the limitation of the animation at the time and the restrictions that the team at Pixar had in developing this. And I want to cut them some slack for that because it's kind of amazing what they did.
I do agree.
But I think there are times when we are scared of Billy where it's unclear whether it's because we are supposed to be afraid of him or it's simply the design of the baby. Take, for instance, the scene where Tinny is in the box looking at the distorted baby through the cellophane. I find myself watching and sort of tempering my emotions in an effort to be respectful to the animation being in its infancy. But I think at times that keeps me hedging my emotions and preventing me from really going on the full journey of the story. So there's another instance where I think music could have really come into handy to heighten the stakes and also indicate to the audience when they have permission by the story to feel afraid and when we're supposed to be feeling something else.
Interesting.
Because it would take some of that pressure that you're putting on yourself of being like, don't be too hard on this. It's the 80s. Don't be too hard on this. Like, oh, look at that baby. Oh, that baby is scary as fuck. Like taking some of that off and like, I want to be able to look at the baby in the cellophane and know like they're intentionally trying to distort that baby and make it look scary and be like, oh, fuck, the baby.
And the music would tell
us.
us.
I don't have that. And I don't have that moment and music would tell us.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Yeah, Billy the baby. I don't have to say anymore, but I know I love you, Billy.
Please do, actually.
Just the fact that his diaper looks like it's floating around his body never stops cracking me up. It's incredible.
Floating, but also has like no depth to it. Like there's no inside of the diaper. It's just kind of like a shell.
Oh, his shit
like
would fall
rock.
right out of that diaper.
It's like a rock. It's like this baby grew out of a rock diaper.
Incredible. Also, when he's like the part where he's drooling and getting overexcited, it starts to feel very Exorcist to me. It has to be mentioned because there's no not seeing it. But honestly,
your mother sucks cock now.
Yeah, like it really is. But honestly, like the short and Billy are still so lovable despite this. And I really do think like we should always have this version available. But I don't know. I think this short absolutely deserves a remaster the way that Knick Knack got one. The original Knick Knack is very like low. It's very lo-fi feeling. Like I would be okay with it. It would be fun. Not as like this is the version of Tin Toy now, but more as a tribute to this short that we all really love. It would be fun.
And sort of like a time capsule moment of like, look how far Pixar has come. Like, don't try and like, honestly, I would even have them just do like a flat out remake, like start from scratch, go frame by frame, remake this in the way that they make Pixar films now and just be like, look where we started and look where we are. I would love to see that.
That would be awesome. I would love that too. Okay. Design and music for Knick Knack, the strength. So when compared to the sometimes horrifying look of baby Billy, this short actually looks more modern than Tin Toy at times because a lot of technological shortcomings can be hidden behind the plastic appearances and very geometric shapes of these characters in the setting. Shapes like these are the strength of computer animation, and this short looks a lot more timeless because of that. And while we don't get as much detail as to the exact setting of this short like we do for Tin Toy, we do get the aesthetic immediately. It's very like retro chic, a little bit mid-century modern, and for a reason that feels, again, sort of intangible. It just feels exactly right. We understand it even from the couple of seconds long title sequence, and it all feels so Pixar without Pixar even having become what it was going to be yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
It feels like something very stylistic important was established here that would get fleshed out years and years later in things like The Incredibles. The stylistic homages to classic cartoons are very subtly well done. Like, I I would have felt it in some way, but unless I was doing research on this, I wouldn't have thought like, yeah, they're copying Looney Tunes. Like features like the iris out, which is the shrinking circle to close the short, are references, of course, to the way things like Looney Tunes cartoons would end that feel familiar to us in a way that helps us understand the tone of the short without feeling like theft. It doesn't feel unoriginal. And the score, it's just absolutely delightful, and it's my favorite aspect of this short. And I will never get over the fact that it was improvised. It just sets the tone of the short absolutely perfectly. I was watching this in a separate room from my husband, who is not familiar with this short. And just from hearing the soundtrack in the other room, he said, I can tell that this is hilarious. And it's so funny. I don't know if I think that the short lives up to the hilarity of the soundtrack. And as I've said, the comedy is good, but not amazing for me. And I think the score even up levels the comedy. The chill, almost elevator music-esque bass of the score provides the perfect contrast to the absolute chaos that Nick is creating. And it helps give the impression that the other Knick Knacks live in this like retro chic, very relaxing world, while the hilarious vocal interjections of like and like satirical classical singing at the end feel like they represent Nick's part of the story. And so like it's just both of those things paired together. Absolutely hilarious. That's where, for me, the comedy absolutely hits in this short.
I fully agree. Bobby McFerrin is the star of the damn show in this. It's the simple layered vocalizations, which most of what he does is jazz improv. Like if you listen to any of his other stuff, that's what Bobby McFerrin does. But I think just like the simple layers of the vocalizations against the simple stylized shapes and designs of the characters, that is a marriage made in heaven. It ties the music and the world together so tightly that like you can't separate the two. And that's exactly what you want to do in a short. Yeah, what you said about the intentionally leaning into the simplistic shapes. I'm like, that was a huge, smart decision that they made. Just basically taking the limitations of the technology and being like, okay, great. We're going to look at that as the confines of the box and play within the box and make the most beautiful thing that we can make within the box. And I think that was a really, really smart thing to do as well. And then, it's always fun to see the origins of other films in the design. And
so cool.
You can see The Incredibles in this design with that sort of like retro futurism sort of thing. Yeah.
And then weaknesses, I really have one here, and it's that I think the short loses a little something in 2D. With the very simple plot and animation style, most of the excitement comes from the action, just like its Looney Tunes inspiration. So to see Nick using a jackhammer or falling into the fishbowl in 3D would add a little something that the short feels like it needs and really highlight what this is trying to be, a zany cartoon action sequence. The pratfalls and, for lack of a better phrase, cartoon violence are the most important aspects, and I think a 3D format would bring them to the forefront, and then I feel like we would have more of a match for the excellent score. So I would love to see it in 3D, and I think I would like it even more that way.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I've never seen it in 3D before, so this is my only exposure, and I'm pretty happy with it overall. I mean, I think design and music is really where this short soars above really a lot of the other shorts that were being made at this time, from Luxo Jr. to Red's Dream, Tin Toy, like everything, like the design and the music combination, they really hit their stride with this one. The biggest thing that I would say sort of kind of harkens back actually to what we were talking about before in terms of the overtly sexualization of the female characters. I'm like, you could have had a woman in a bathing suit for sunny Florida that was wearing a different bathing suit than that.
Yeah.
And we still would have gotten the thing like beautiful, attractive woman or whatever. But there is a world where she could have been wearing a one piece that fully covers her breasts.
Yeah. I can't believe we're talking about this. We talk about breasts so much in this episode, and I just can't even.
This is the booby episode. I mean, we even talked about nipples with a baby.
We really did talk about
This is the booby episode.
Oh, God. Who would have thought?
So, yeah, that's really our deep dive analysis of these two. I guess closing thoughts that you've got. Let's decide between the two. I really
Yeah.
think, like, design music-wise, I think Knick Knack has it.
I do agree with you. And I think definitely story and character is Tin Toy.
Yeah. It's very funny. Going into this, I was like, oh, Knick Knack. Knick Knack, Knick Knack, Knick Knack. Like, it's just...
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, interesting.
Yes. And I think part of that was because of my prejudice. Because as a kid, Tin Toy was the one that I always wanted to watch. Always wanted to watch. Like, that and Red's Dream.
Interesting.
Which is like, I loved Red's Dream, which is depressing as all fuck.
Yeah. That's why he was like, I need to make a comedy with one of these shorts.
That was my shit. But Tin Toy, when Tin Toy came on, I'm like, this is my short. This is my short, baby. I love this one. And I think going into this, I was trying to temper that in myself of like my emotional attachment to Tin Toy. And I was like, okay, structurally, I'm like, which one operates better as a short? And I'm like, damn, I really feel like Knick Knack does it. But as we've had this discussion and as I was doing more research and as I was watching these, I wasn't prepared for how jarred I would be by Knick Knack. In the same way that you had that experience.
Yeah.
I have such fond memories of it. And then watching it back, I was like, that wasn't quite as funny as I thought it was.
I had the same experience. I watched Knick Knack first, and I was like, oh, am I just like feeling humorless today? Like, what's wrong with me? And then I was very thoroughly entertained by Tin Toy.
I watched Tin Toy first and then went to Knick Knack because I was like, oh, I'm going to save like the real solid one for later. And I don't know. I was just sort of like, slightly let down in places, and it was mostly in the middle.
Yeah,
like the escalation of the different events was there, but I'm just like, he uses his nose as a hammer.
It's not even particularly. Yeah, that's the thing. Is it's like I could see this pulling ahead, even though it basically is an homage to classic cartoons. If it's done, if the situational humor is in there, I could see it pulling ahead. But like, those problem-solving things that, these kinds of cartoon characters do, it wasn't particularly funny to me. I don't know. Like,
in many ways, I think what makes these cartoons funny is the sort of like Rube Goldberg machine-esque way in which these characters connect the dots. They always choose the most complicated way and not the straight line. And it felt like there were a lot of opting for the straight line choices that Nick was making. And the only time I laughed was when he did find the most convoluted way with the frickin', he has gas underwater and is trying to light it, and he successfully lights it. And I'm like, that makes no damn sense at all. It's so fucking entertaining. And I'm like, that's the part that I bought into.
And it's also just like, I said this earlier, but I always want like Bugs Bunny or Pepe Le Pew to get the girl. And I just like actually don't particularly... I'm like, Nick, you can just like stay in your little snow globe.
Yeah, I'm like kind of like Sunny Atlantis. I'm like, that might be for the best.
Yeah, leave her alone.
Somebody above is looking out for you.
Maybe I'm taking it too seriously. But again, even if I'm not, I wanted to laugh more. I wanted to laugh a little bit more.
Yeah, where the intention of Tin Toy, it didn't feel like it was trying to set you up to laugh.
But you do.
Like,
you naturally do.
Yes, you do laugh. Like, you know you're going to, but it's like the mission of it is not how many laughs per minute, where the mission of Knick Knack is how many laughs per minute.
Yeah.
And so from that, overall, for me, looking at what each of these shorts is aiming to do and versus how far they achieve them, I personally think that Tin Toy comes closer to achieving what it sought out to do than Knick Knack does.
I agree.
Taking it out of context and putting it in 2024.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. I also just want to watch Tin Toy more than I want to watch Knick Knack. And if I have a young child that I want to show shorts to, I would show them Tin Toy over Knick Knack, like, easily.
Oh, interesting. There's something so rewatchable about Knick Knack for me.
Like I said, I glaze over a little. I don't know what it is.
I think it's the music that makes it rewatchable for me.
I do love that freaking music. It's so good.
Where I'm like, I'll tolerate this for the music, baby.
Yeah.
The music and the aesthetic.
The aesthetic is very, very good. It's tough, but I think
I think I'm comfortable saying tin toy on this one.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It's you can feel the birth of so many things in Tin Toy.
Yeah. I'm glad that we have both of these shorts.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that score, that music.
If you told me save one, I'm saving Tin Toy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's more important to me.
Yeah, it would change the timeline of everything if we got rid of
Yeah.
Tin Toy. But yeah, no, but I think there's really important things happening with the score and Knick Knack for sure that, like, again, is something that I don't even know if, like you said, if it's been done that well, but definitely, again, planted the seeds for things happening later. So have to give kudos to that.
I agree. Listen, I love Pixar shorts, and we
Yeah.
would not have the affinity for Pixar shorts that we have today without these two shorts, which are among the first 5 that
Yeah, it's
Pixar
amazing.
ever
These
made.
are before Toy Story. It's just amazing. Yeah.
But
we have a showdown with an actual winner this time. Look at us.
we have a showdown with an actual winner, folks. We do. And I am totally in for doing future showdowns between Pixar shorts because I think that they're actually like perfect and primed and ready. And
Yeah.
there are so many shorts that I want to talk about.
I know.
I want to talk about Partly Cloudy so bad.
I know.
I want to talk about Lava so bad.
Lava, you know me and Lava.
I know.
And Bow and freaking Bow. Oh, man.
It could be a bracket. We'll see what
Could
happens in the
be.
future. But congratulations, Tin Toy. You are our
Yes.
winner of this showdown. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast. That way, all of our episodes download to your device. You don't miss out on anything. And then this is that moment where if you liked what you heard, please hit 5 stars, leave a written review wherever you're listening to the podcast. Leave a comment on Spotify, write something, share this with a friend, hit the little like share button and send this episode to a couple friends in a group chat. It is the best thing that you can do to help support Caroline and I as we continue to try and grow this podcast into what we think it can be. So thank you so much for playing your part in that.
We would also love it if you would follow us on social media. We are at Poor Unfortunate Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and TikTok. And yeah, as unfortunate as it may be, it is so key to grow a social media following in order for people to find you anywhere these days. It doesn't matter if you're a brand, if you're a podcast, whatever it is. So it just like, it is so helpful to us. It is free to you. Just give us a little follow, give us the like, drop us a comment on a post on any of those social media sites. It also just is very encouraging to Conor and I. So thank you to those of you who do it. And as I mentioned, the Poor Unfortunate Fam, our private Facebook group, those are the folks who chose the shorts that were part of this showdown. So if you want to have a hand in crafting what Poor Unfortunate Podcast is and what we talk about, please join us in the fam. We have over 100 members at this point. We talk about the episodes. We talk about Disney news, Disney trips. It is such a
We talk about
fabulous-
how your day is going.
Yeah, also we did a check-in. Like, it's just such a warm and fabulous place to be. You do not have to be a big Facebook user. As I've said before, I literally only go on Facebook to check the Poor Unfortunate Fam. So you can do that too. And Conor and I would absolutely love to get to know you, to learn your name, learn what your favorite episode types are. What do you want us to talk about? We want to hear it all. So please join and come say hello.
And if you're looking for merch, the Poor Unfortunate shop is open, poorunfortunatepodcast.com/shop. So as you prep for any of your trips that you have coming up, you can grab some merchandise. You can grab hats, t-shirts, water bottles, all that good stuff. Bags, I have to say, like the drawstring cloth bag, I get so much use out of it, and it's actually really, really nice. And it's probably the thing in our shop that I love the most. So highly recommend that.
Mine is the dad
Yeah.
hat. I love the dad hat.
Yeah, which comes in 3 different colors. Comes in black, pink, and blue.
Yes.
Make it pink, make it blue.
Love.
And as I always say, it does take us a little bit of money to keep the podcast up and running and coming to you. We do have a PayPal account. It is linked in our episode description and in the website links on our social media accounts. Truly, anything that you have to spare goes a long way for us. It could be $1, $5, $10, more than that. It could be a one-time donation. It could be a monthly donation. It all just goes right back into the podcast, helping us keep it free and ad-free for the most part. And to all of our monthly donors, thank you so much for your contributions. This
Thank
wouldn't
you.
happen without you. Alrighty, we will see you next week for a new episode of Caroline What's New. And then after that for a tips and tricks episode. So until then, Beluga Savruga.